Good evening, guys. Hope you're all doing well. What a year has been that we're able to. We've just been done so many Zoom meetings. It seems like that I've done a lot of those, and I guess we've gotten pretty comfortable with that. But I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to actually having camp and seeing some people in the room and being able to do it safely and being able to interact. So I'm going to be talking tonight about what I'm going to be going over in camp. And it's my understanding from James that the audience tonight are people that are the trainers in your association, or you're a member of the playoff evaluation board. And I'd just like to say first, thank you for your contribution to your associations, to the Georgia High School. I think we all just want to have an influence to try to make the game of football good for the student athletes. Everything we do is about the student athletes. It's not about us. It's really about the student athletes, and certainly athletics plays a vital role in the lives of these young people. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what's expected, from the referee position. I know Rob talked over the umpire position on Tuesday. And I know he probably went over a couple of things. There might be a little bit of duplicate at the beginning, but I don't think there'll be a lot. But I want to just start off by saying that everybody that's on this call, you probably have worked the playoffs, and or you're interested in the playoffs. And so James gave the training committee very specific instructions this year as to what we would be training, and we're talking strictly about the manual. I'm not going to give you anything tonight that everybody on this call has probably not already read. So, I don't know that you're not going to get any, there's not going to be any grand thought that you're going to get from me other than the expectations for officials who want to work a semifinal or a final and move deeper into the playoffs. We're going to tell you what the criteria is. And I think that we've come a long way in the 25 years or 30 years that I've been doing football. I think that the evaluation process, it just gets better and better and better every year. And when I first started going to the camps, we were really trying to help all the officials in the state of Georgia get better. Now, this particular camp is to try to train the officials that are seeking to be playoff eligible and potentially an opportunity to work a state championship. And so I actually think that the state playoff games this year were probably as well officiated as they've ever been. And I think it went really well. And all those guys, and some of you may be on the call that worked those games, congratulations to you. And I'm happy. And I always talk about how that we should celebrate everyone's successes. And so I appreciate Kevin Giddens. I think he's doing a great job leading the football program for the Georgia High School. I appreciate that he's doing what he said he's going to do. And that's exactly what he did last year. I do think that we've learned some things in the last couple of years through the rubric. And I think we're going to continue to learn some things this year. I think Georgia High School has done a really good job in the past of teaching the evaluators on how to use the rubric. But I don't know that we've actually done a very good job of training the evaluators as to how we can bring forth the consistency as it relates to how we evaluate. I've been on the playoff evaluation board for several years, and I enjoy doing it. And my crew was evaluated last year. We went to the quarterfinals. We didn't go any further, and I was fine with that. But do I feel like there were some evaluations that maybe that we got back that maybe might have been just, maybe it just missed the mark a little bit? Sure. Did I complain about it? No. But I did use that as a way to try to help us to where we are today, after the season. And several of us have talked about how we can make this process better. So the reality is, I'm going to go over with you at the referee position. I'm going to go over with you what the expectations are as it relates to how you're evaluated on, what you're evaluated on, what's expected in order to be able to evaluate well. So I have a presentation. I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to show a lot of film. This is going to be, I've had this outline done for over a month. I have finished this presentation in the last couple of days. I went back over it again today. And so I am going to, this is the presentation that I'll be delivering during the summer to everyone who attends. And so I'm just going to walk through it. I'm going to walk through it. The title of my presentation is called The Thou Shouts and the Thou Shalt Nots. Okay. As you know, I'm a pastor and I'm a believer, and I firmly believe in the 10 Commandments. And that's not what I'm going to talk about. But I do know that if there are certain things as we go through our evaluation process, we look at our positions, there are things that the manual says that we shall do, and there are things that the manual says that thou shalt not do. So that's going to be the general theme as we move through this presentation. That's going to be the general theme. All right. So let's go to the next thing. All right. So when I go through the camp, we'll do welcome and introductions. We'll go over the training agenda and the objectives and the ground rules and the expectations. All right. The ground rules tonight is simply that,
But clearly both of these dishes had some flaws. I'm going to.
There we go. Thank you. If you're not muted, please do mute. I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions, and we will have some rhetorical, at the end. I've got my screen full, so I'm not really looking in the chat. But if somebody, feels like they have something that they need to interject, you can unmute and say, hey, Greg, but I'm going to try to do this within about 30 or 40 minutes and then give you an opportunity to discuss. So as you know, GHSA this year has given us some specific directives for 2021. And, sportsmanship is one of them. And what I love about what I read about what Kevin sent out is that we have the support of GHSA. And for us as referees and for us as officials, we shall handle this, and we shall handle it professionally. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do that. And as it relates to, how you're evaluated, I can assure you, if you have issues of sportsmanship, even though that may not be something that shows up on your evaluation, you may not show up on film. Those things are certainly going to get back to the people that would need to know that. So you got to handle sportsmanship. The second thing is that, I think behavior last year from coaches on the sideline in my games was as good as it's ever been. I would remind them in the pregame, hey, let's just be thankful that we're getting to play. And I think a lot of coaches took that to heart. Obviously, when you get to the postseason, things change a little bit. But I like the fact that, this is just kind of like in basketball. In basketball, only the head coach talks to the referee, and the assistant coach has to stay seated. Well, that's the kind of the way I look at it now in football. It's only the head coach that's going to be able to talk to us or talk to the guys on the sideline. And we have we have the GHSA support. And again, we got to handle this, and we got to handle it professionally. I'm not going to talk about the free blocking zone because I'm sure that Rob handled that. But as referees, this must be in our pregame, and our umpires must be crystal clear on this new rule. And we're not going to talk about rules tonight at all. But I did want to mention that. The other thing is sideline etiquette. We have the support of the GHSA. Again, we shall handle this, and we shall handle it professionally. I have several thoughts about that, but I'll hold that to another time. We may be doing a breakout on this, but certainly these are the directives at the GHSA. And then game administrators and security of officials. Again, we have the GHSA support. And the one thing that I would say is referees, I don't know how you handle it in your group. I don't know how you handle it on your crew. But in my crew and in our association, the referee is responsible for that game report. And so if you have issues with this kind of stuff, this is a must. Those game reports must be sent into your association, to your assigner, and hopefully they will do as GHSA is asking them to do, and they will get that into the GHSA. All right. So we're going to start off with this, and I want to say this to kind of get us started here. When we think about the referee, especially when we're talking about postseason and the opportunity to be able to go to a semifinal or final, the referee cannot be the weak link on a crew. There are a lot of responsibilities that referees have. We don't get paid anymore, but we have a lot more responsibility. And we may not be the best referee, we may not be the best official on our crew, but we can't be the weak link. And we have to play the role. We have to set the standards. And the way we set the standards is by making sure that they know, what the mechanics manual says. So if I ask you, did you know what the acronym RDP stood for? I hope that all of you would know that means that is the referee digital portal. All right. This is where we go to get all our information. And I use this all the time. And so the mechanics manual is the gospel. Everybody should have access to the manual. This is the GHSA way, plain and simple. If you've got guys in your group, when I watch film, and I'll speak to this a little bit as we go through, when I watch film and I see people repeatedly deviating from what the manual says, it just says to me a couple of different things. Number one is they think their way's better, or maybe they just don't necessarily agree with the way the manual's written. And so I call that rebellion. I just absolutely call that rebellion. Or maybe they're one of those guys that has attended camp and they've just checked a box. And, we all go to camp in a sense to check a box. But if you don't go with the idea of you're going to learn something, you're going to do what is being told of you, then you're not really a team player. And so maybe you just check a box, or maybe it would be a shame for an association to send guys to work the postseason, especially those who are wanting to be eligible for a semifinal or final, and know full well that they do it their own way. They don't follow the GHSA manual. Well, that's not good. And so the reality is the RDP, or the mechanics manual, that is the tool of measurement. And that is what equals the GHSA rubric. All right. And so that is what we're looking. I'm sure Rob went over this with you guys, but as you know, the scoring aspects for the GHSA rubric are these 5 categories. And when I go to start an evaluation, I feel like that if a crew has been sent in for a semifinal or final, they're starting as proficient. All right. They have proved themselves to be proficient in order to be able to possibly work a semifinal or final. So when I start evaluating a crew, everybody's a 3. Everybody's a 3. And then from there, I work my way either up or I work my way either down. And I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along the presentation. So that's how I do it. I think there was a few times last year, as I evaluated crews that I had a couple of 5s in a couple of categories. I don't think I gave anybody a 1 in any of the games. There were several 2s, several 2.5s, obviously some 4s. But the reality is, I'm one of those guys that if I go to a restaurant and they want it to be a 5-star, it has to be perfect. It has to be absolutely perfect to get a 5 with me. But that's just me. But everybody starts at a 3. And then, as you know, there are 2 things that will cause you major problems and will disqualify crews. All right. If you have a misapplication of a rule, that even if it doesn't affect the outcome of a game, that's a type 1 definition. And Kevin's got to know about it. If you have an inadvertent whistle that does not affect the outcome of a game, Kevin Giddens got to know about it. If you have a type 2 definition and it does affect the outcome of the game, or an inadvertent whistle that does, you know what? Then you're not gonna move on. That's a problem, because you have hurt these student athletes with the opportunity to live out their dreams. And just like they have dreams, we have dreams. We all want to be the officials that get the opportunity to work the last game. But the reality is, there are certain things that we can control, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well. All right. So basically, this is the thou shalt and the thou shalt not. The mechanics manual is 70 pages with pictures. All right. And as white hats, as referees, we got to know all 70 pages. Because if you want your crew to be successful, we have to know it. The buck stops with us in regards to our crew. If there's a question, if there's a disagreement, we were having a discussion, one of our pre-games this past year about, onside kicks and whether or not the wings jumped over the deeps, and so everybody was digging in the manual, and I just let them go for a while till I finally said, this is ridiculous. You guys are supposed to know this. I'm the white hat and I know it. So I told them what they were supposed to do. We must know what it is, guys. As referees, your referees have to know that. And the other thing is as crews, we have to self-evaluate every week. So just as when I was given an evaluation, from the Georgia high school to evaluate, I did the exact same thing with my crew starting with about week 5, early on in the season, I did that. But then as we moved on, I would evaluate. I would look at every play, and I would send, them plays to look at and mechanics stuff. We have to be able to self-evaluate, and we have to be honest with one another. All right. So let's just start at the very beginning of the manual. If you got your manual handy, we're just going to walk right through it. I'm not going to dive into a lot of it. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to tell you just a little things, some of the little things that I think, are important as to the thou shalt and the thou shalt nots. Page 99, pregame responsibilities. All right. Your pregame responsibilities before you ever get out onto the field and kind of as you're getting out there, these are not going to be things that show up on film. All right. But I promise you that if you don't take care of this piece, it's gonna show up in the game at some point, because it's gonna be obvious that you're not prepared. Everyone has a responsibility. Everyone needs to look crisp. First impressions last a lifetime, and everybody has to do their job. All right. You have to be focused. You have to. It's when you get out on that football field for your pregame responsibilities. You have got to be ready. And when you go have that pregame meeting with your coaches, you need to be following. I think we sent this out several years back. There's really 5 things you need to ask those questions. Ask the questions those coaches. You need to do those 5 questions and move on, and don't make those meetings long. Hopefully you've already reached out and engaged them before you got there, but it's important. Pre-game responsibilities are important. All right. The second thing is page 100, and it talks about meeting with the timers. All right. Time matters. Time matters. If you don't have a good clock operator and you don't have a good, play clock operator, when there's a problem, everybody's going to notice it. Everybody's going to expect it. I did an on-field evaluation for the GHSA in a semifinal game this past year, and there was an issue in a clock that actually when the game went to overtime, and it was kind of chaotic there for a few minutes. The crew recovered well, but the reality is, they're the least visible, but they have very high expectations. Anybody can run a clock, right? Well, that's not true. A good clock operator makes a huge difference in a game, and certainly a play clock as well. Again, this may or may not be one of those things that's going to show up on film as a part of the evaluation process, because in many times with evaluations, we don't ever know what the time is. We don't ever know what the play clock is unless we can see it. But the reality is this will disrupt the flow of your game. And if you disrupt the flow of your game, that's probably going to be pretty easy to be able to see on film. The other thing is page 101 and 102, the on the field crew and the chain crew. All right. I came up with an acronym about 15 or 20 years ago when I was assigning, and I came up with this acronym called TYCC, things you can control. All right. You can control these things. You got to have that most of us that are working in the playoffs, we might have the same people going with us every week on the chain crew. Those guys are just as vital and as important as the guys that are on the field. My chain guys, they wear radios. They help us. They don't let us miss downs. They don't let us screw up penalty enforcements. They help us, because a lot of times when we're on the field, we kind of get in a hurry, and a good chain crew can be our friend. And it's important that we do that. They're not always on film, but if you forego this meeting, it will show up on film later. So it's important that you make sure you have that. Then we go to the coin toss, pages 103 and 104. It gives us specific instructions on where we should be, what we should be doing, and how this should take place. Don't screw this up. Everyone has a job. Last year was kind of a different situation. We only took a couple of captains out there, and, we didn't shake hands. We did shake hands. We spread out. We socially distanced. Hopefully in 2021, that'll go away. But it's very important. And make sure that your umpire's connected with you. Some of you guys on your film, you actually show your coin toss, and that's great. I personally, like to see it. I'm not going to gig a crew. The semifinal crew that I went and observed, I don't know if the coaches had decided before. I don't know. A lot of times we'll know what their choices are. We'll know the coin toss is irrelevant. But I don't even recall them actually having a coin toss. I watched the game I was on, but it just looked funky. But they did a great job with the game. I didn't really gig them for it. I mentioned it in the evaluation, but I didn't really scale them down for that, because This was not really a part of the actual game itself, but it was mentioned in their pregame. Don't screw this up. All right. All right. So now, and this is this is just I copy this right out of the mechanics gram, put it up here. This is our positions for the coin toss. Thou shalt do it like this. All right. You know, and I mean, it's, so if you'll notice in this particular diagram, the referee, the scoreboard you'll see is in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen. So, I've had people ask me in the past, hey, do you want to be facing the scoreboard or do you not? That's old. That's old. The referee always walks out with the press box to his back and the captains will be on his left shoulder. Always, thou shalt do it this way. So make sure that you do it like this, because that's not gonna set up very well. Now we're going to talk about pages 105 and 111, the thou shalts and the thou shalt nots. All right. So we have our positioning, our zones, and our coverage. Those are things you can control. Anything that happens before that ball is snapped, it is specifically thou shalt be in this particular area. All right. And it's important that we do it. Thou shalt not deviate from it. All right. And then we have our free kick coverage, our onside kick positioning and zones. This again, these are things you can control. And then the onside kick coverage. So again, I just copied this right out of the manual. It's very clear and very specific as to where, people will be and what people will do. And I mean, this is what you guys need to be teaching. And this is what, as evaluators, we should be looking for as it relates to mechanics during when we're evaluating. I mean, it's just that simple. All right. And these are our actual last year. As you know, this was a change from our mechanics manual last year. We have specific areas of coverage for every position. We should have the entire field covered. And as you know, it's a mobile box. We just move down the field as the ball carrier and as the ball goes down. All right. When we lose focus on these areas and we have things that happen, and I have many clips that I could show you of evaluated films that I watched where something happened in the field judge's area, but the ball was clearly on the other side and he wasn't watching his area. He was ball watching. And those things always show up on film. All right. And then we have the free kick and the onside kick. And I alluded to this earlier. And I saw this on film this year in some of the evaluations where we would have onsides. And what would happen is the field judge and the side judge would bump up, between the 40 and the 50 rather than the wings hopping over them or jumping over them and being on the 45. All right. Thou shalt line up like this. And this is the referee's call as to whether or not we will move up into this position. Any good referee is going to listen to his crew, but the final call is going to be made by the referee. So it's important, that we do these in this manner. Then we have scrimmage plays. This is the largest section in the manual as far as the number of pages that are covered. Pages 112 through 121. All right. And it gives us specific instructions about where we should be before the snap, how we count players, when we count players, the signals that we use when we count those players, substitution procedures. Even though, in the college game, it's different than our game, and we don't really have anything that prohibits substitution or anything that needs to stop. But we need to be aware of that because that's how we know, when we're ready to go. Running play coverage, goal line positioning, reverse goal line, forward pass coverage. These are the thou shalts that we must know, and they must be an art to us and not a science. So specifically speaking about the referee should always be on the passing arm side of the quarterback. The referee has the quarterback or the runner until they pass the line of scrimmage. He's going to be following that play. His initial key is the offside tackle. He should be, depending upon the formation, usually 12 to 13 yards in depth. And he needs to be wide enough in which that he can see that tackle and he can also see through the quarterback and be able to see the quarterback receive that snap, especially, in a shotgun or a pistol formation. He needs to be able to see the quarterback's hands, and he needs to be able to see the tackle. So you need to get wide enough in order to be able to do that. There are many examples on film as to where we have referees across the state that are just lining up wherever they want. Either they don't know where to go, either they don't know what to do, but they don't line up correctly. If we have time, I'm going to show you just a couple of clips tonight of what I'm talking about. But when I'm evaluating film, this is the first thing that I look at. That very first play from scrimmage, I'm looking to see whether or not, number one, is my referee lined up correctly? Number two, is he communicating with the umpire as to whether or not he's ready for him to back off? I use the wave off signal every play. It doesn't matter what. My umpire knows he's going to be at the ball or near the ball. He's going to wait on me to wave him off. Now, I'm not telling you have to do that, even though our manual says there needs to be that communication. And we did talk about this a few years ago about using the wave off. And I specifically talked about it last year with referees. But I watched game after game after game where the umpire puts the ball down, turns around, goes to his spot. The referee's got his back turned. He's not to his position, and anything could have happened. Anything could have happened. And so I'm telling you, as an evaluator for myself, that is a big deal for me. Now, if that consistently happens during the game, when I get to the referee, when I evaluate that referee and I get to his part in the rubric, I'm going to mention that. And I'm probably not going to give him as good a grade as I would have if he had lined up correctly and if I'd seen him actually communicating with his umpire in the manner that he would. So once I wave my umpire off, then I'm going to count the offense and I'm going to give that signal, and my umpire is going to give it back to me. Countless number of games I watched this year where that did not take place. And so I'm just telling you, for me, that's a big deal. But I mean, again, if the referee does a good job for the whole game, am I going to mark him down a whole point for that? Probably not. But I am going to, it is going to hurt him in his evaluation because he's choosing not to do as the manual tells us that he should do. All right. The other thing that I would say is that, the passing arm side. I had a game this year. It was an evaluated game. And I had three quarterbacks. I had 12, I had 13, and I had 14. 12 was right-handed, 13 was left-handed, and 14 was right-handed. They ran it out all the time. And I was trying to keep up with their numbers, and multiple times I ended up on the wrong side. All right, I ended up on the wrong side. Now, I don't think the evaluator, he graded me down because I ended up on the wrong side, which was true. But I don't think he had any idea that I had three players that were of different numbers. So if somebody lines up, if quarterback is number 10 and he's left-handed and he lines up for 12 plays on the right side, on the wrong side, then yeah, that's a problem. That is a problem. He should be focused enough to be able to get that correct. But if you have quarterbacks that are running in and out, evaluators, I would say use common sense. Think about it in the manner if that were you. And so I would think that is important. But running play coverage, this is where our keys are on running play coverage. This is goal line coverage. So for the referee position, nothing really changes for us when we get down to the goal line. It basically stays the same. All right. So, but again, everybody in your crew has to know what their deal is. And as referees, we have to be able to help them with that. Reverse goal line mechanics. Obviously, again, we're going to be on the end line. Nothing really changes for us as far as that we still got the same responsibilities, the same keys, but we must know this and we must adhere to it. All right. Forward pass coverage. This is where it gets a little bit of a challenge for us. We've got the quarterback. We've got to stay with the quarterback. We may have to move to our right. We may have to move to our left. And as you know, as referees, we want to try to move parallel with the goal line, as best we can, but we don't want to get too close to the quarterback. And then we also have the responsibility of ruling whether or not we have intentional grounding. And a lot of times we may or may not be able to see that. And I know that, crews are going to help you with that, but the flag does need to come from us. And if it does require a conversation, it requires a conversation. If it's a late flag, if you get it right, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to grade anybody down for that because those are hard for us. But again, forward pass coverage, we know we have the quarterback. All right. So now we move to reading and understanding your keys. pages 122 through 127. All right. When it comes to reading your keys, this really doesn't change for the referees and umpires. Our keys stay the same pretty much for the whole game. Now, I know the umpires' responsibilities change a little bit. Once we get inside the goal line, they then have the line of scrimmage. But as far as, it's not a major change. He's still looking at the meat and potatoes, the guard and the guards in the center, But as referees, ours basically changes. All right. But I'm telling you, as referees, if you don't have conversations with your crews about the 3 receiver sets, the stacking, the red zone, when there's motion, when there's not motion, all of that, I'm telling you, with as fast as the game is today, if your guys don't recognize that and put that and get that figured out quickly, it's gonna be a problem. All right, it's gonna be a problem. All right. Hang on just a minute. I see a message here from James. Is everything going okay now? Am I freezing up? Am I good? Good. I can't see y'all, so all right, okay. All right, so let's keep going here. All right. Let's talk about punts. Punts is a pretty big deal. The kicking game is a pretty big deal. All right. So this is pages 128 through 131. All right. And so we have specific positioning and zones. We have coverages. When it's a block, we have specific. Those are things we can control. These are the thou shouts. So the initial punt coverage, for the referee is we're going to be on the kicking leg side, and we're going to be, 3 yards or so, deeper than the 3 yards or so deeper than the punter, and we're gonna be a little bit more parallel than normal. We're not going to be too deep. James always gives me a hard time and tells me that I'm too deep, so I've tried to move up a little bit. But it's important that we know that, and we have that kicker. And we have to make sure, and if the ball is tipped, we're going to try to give the signal so that everybody can recognize that. We also have some responsibilities as it relates to the shield blocking. The umpire has a lot of that, but we also have some responsibilities with that as well. And so so it's important that we know what our initial punt coverage is. After the kick is over, we're gonna stay with the kicker. We're gonna watch the meat and potatoes behind us. We're gonna move downfield just a little bit, but realizing that if that thing goes all the way, that we're going to have to try to get back and potentially help with the goal line. But it's important that we know what our coverage is after the kick. All right. So now we have scoring kicks, pages 132 and 134. Again, no different than the other. Positioning in zones, a fake kick, swinging gate, the lateral position of the lateral position of the ball, and then the kick after an awarded fair catch. You got to know these things. And I have some film that I would show to you that would show you where we have referees lining up incorrectly on try for points and on scoring kicks, field goals. We have referees still lining up incorrectly, and some still giving the untimed down signal. We don't use the untimed down signal in this case unless it actually is an untimed down, at the end of the period. We don't use the untimed signal for tries. So it's important that we know that. And again, this is basically what our positioning is. We're going to be a couple yards deeper than that kicker. We're going to be wide enough so that we can see, the ball leave the center's hands and actually make it to the holder. And then we've got the holder and the kicker, and we're going to stay with them the whole time. We're not going to watch the ball. Sometimes I'm guilty of that. But we don't want to watch the ball, and this positioning will show up on film. All right. If we don't get it right. All right. Then we have timeouts, the thou shouts and the thou shalt nots about timeouts, pages 135 and 136. All right. And we do have specific areas of coverage. We do know that the teams are supposed to be inside the team box. Now, whether or not Georgia high school continues to expand the team box as a result of, COVID, who knows? We did not make a big deal out of that this past year. But the reality is we do have areas in which they're supposed to be. If they're going to the sidelines, they got to be inside the numbers. If they're coming to the middle of the field, they got to be on their side of the ball, and they got to be, inside the hashes. And so basically those are things you can control. Some of this may show up on film if you're one of those crews that's filming those areas. Some of it may not. If you get a TV game and you have somebody watching, if one of my crews that I evaluate has a TV game, or if I can find it on the National Federation Network, I will try to go and watch it just simply because Huddle doesn't give the stuff that happens between downs. And to me, that's one of the vital parts of knowing whether or not a crew is capable of moving on to the next round. So I always try to find that. I have my own subscription to it. And so that I do that. But timeouts, it's important as we know where we are. working with the timers. I kind of already alluded to this earlier. We gotta make sure that we work well with them and that we communicate with them. Hopefully your timers are wearing clocks, or they're wearing radios, and that you're communicating with them, and that that they're helping you. And you're using your signals. Your deep people are helping you when you need to do this, when you need to do this. It's important. They can make or break a crew's chemistry. I had a game this year where I just had a terrible clock operator, and it just really throws me out of sync. When coaches are yelling and things are happening, working with the timers is vital. We must learn how to work with them. All right. Measurements. A lot of times these are not going to show up on film. They may or they may not, but I'm telling you, it's important. Everybody has a job, and we can't screw it up. And we need to make sure that we have people in the right spot. This kind of got our crew out of sync a couple of times this year. When you're on a turf field, it's pretty easy. You don't have a lot of measurements. But I had the opportunity to go to Norcross on a rainy Friday night, and that field was chewed up all to pieces. And we had a couple of measurements, and we just didn't handle it very well. Wasn't on film, but it just took me out of my rhythm because we just didn't do it very well. It's important. Go over these things, practice it, with your crew, especially if you're a crew that's potentially looking to go to the semis or the semifinals. Practice it. Those are things you can control. Don't screw it up. Make sure that I always keep the down on the down that we're on, not the down that we're going to, until we've decided whether or not it's first down or fourth down or whatever. Make sure you communicate with your crew so that you do it and you get it right. And then, page 145 talks about intermission, where we go during intermission, between the halves, at halftime. We have to stay focused during those times. And we have to be able to regather ourselves if we need to. It might be an opportunity you need to go to somebody that's maybe having a tough game and bring them back up. But as referees, we have to do that. It's probably not going to show up on film. But again, this is in the manual, and we have specific instructions on what we should do on page 145. Fouls and enforcements, page 146 through 151. And I really like the way the manual breaks this down. And I would challenge you to read it and go over it and go over it with your crew, because efficient enforcement of penalties is going to really make a difference between, a good crew and a great crew. How you handle that. A lot of times there's sometimes when we can just move right on quickly through them. We know what we need to do, but there's some of them we have to really have discussions. We have to go through the process. We have to do that. Everybody has a role and everybody has a responsibility. And we're looking for those things. If I'm an evaluator and I know that the headline judge is supposed to walk off the penalties with the umpire, and then the line judge follows up, I'm looking for those little things. All right. That's not going to make or break a crew, but if that looks good, that's going to be a plus in their favor. Now, if they screw up a penalty enforcement and they don't get it right, then that's a problem. All right. So there are things you must know, and I know all you referees get all that. There are guidelines, and it's important. And I really felt like that the guys that worked our state championships, I thought they did a good job of the microphone. We've talked about that. I think that really went well for us. Just always remember, less is more, and that can hurt you if you're being evaluated and you have a microphone and you're on the Peachtree TV or whatever, and your evaluator goes back and he watches that, that could potentially hurt you as a referee, because obviously the Georgia high school wants people in those semifinals and in those finals games that can communicate well and look good and communicate with the mic. All right. The overtime procedure. He gives specific instructions on page 152 about our overtime procedure, and I think it's important. If you get to this point in your game, you better be on point, because if you're not, it's going to be bad. Every play and every decision at this point matters. I always tell my crews, whenever we get near the end of the game or we get a situation like that, we got a tight game, this is all they're going to remember. It doesn't matter how well you did previously. This is all they're going to remember. So as referees, we have to make sure that we do a good job. We have to make sure that we understand what the manual says about our overtime procedure. All right. And, as far as, how you handle your crew mechanically with that, I think we give some leeway as to whether or not you just want to take captains to the middle field or whether you want to take coaches. We give you some leeway with that. Whatever you need to do at that particular point is fine. All right. It is fine. Just make sure that everybody knows what's going to transpire and don't screw it up, because if you do, that could really be difficult for you. All right. And then pages 153 through 165, talks about the basic officiating guidelines, the thou shalt and the thou shalt nots. And these are the things that you can control. This is not specific to any particular position, but as you're training your people and as we're evaluating these people, these things are going to during live ball, these areas right here are the areas that are going to make or break a crew in a lot of situations. You got to look good in your uniform. Your appearance has got to be good. How you carry yourself, how you walk. Is your bean bag and your hat, does it look good? Are you using the right color bean bag? Making sure you're recording the information on your card. Does your crew look well whenever? Do they look good? Does it look well? Does it match up when you're getting forward progress and spotting the ball? Are you getting bean bags down on fumbles? When you should. Are you handling your sideline plays well? Is the referee moving as he should be? If dead ball officiating is on the film, are you handling the ball well? Are you addressing sportsmanship issues? Or are you flagging them? Are you communicating well with your other officials? Does it look well? If you have to change a call, are you tracking and reporting your fouls? I'm going to take a point right here and say that for those crews that this past year that did send in penalty reports, whenever they did get their huddle film uploaded and then they sent in their penalty report, and my crew and an expectation that I have when I get a penalty report is that it's going to be legible, it's going to have the huddle play numbers, and it's going to be accurate. That's what I expect of my crew, whether I like it or whether I don't. That's what we do. And I think it's important that you do that. It's much easier for an evaluator. And if you're an evaluator on the call, I watch almost every play of every game that I evaluate. It took me about an hour and 15 minutes to evaluate every game because I went through every play and I made notes for every game. And I looked at the penalty report and I made sure that, yes, I did. Their penalty report matched. It's really difficult, on some of the huddle films. You may or may not see you might see the flag, but you don't really know whether they accepted, declined. You have to try to figure it all out. But if you've got a penalty report, it's much easier. So trainers, I would say to your crews that are looking to get a semifinal or final, make sure they're using the GHSA penalty report and they're filling it out correctly and they're adding the huddle play numbers. All right. And then, just make sure you have a good idea about how you want to handle unsportsmanlike fouls. Unsportsmanlike behavior is a big deal with Georgia high school in all sports. And I think I think it was better last year in the games that I had. It was better, but I still think you have to be able to know how to handle those guidelines. All right. So this is really the end of my presentation. Then I'll take some questions and we can talk for a minute and I'll maybe make a couple more comments. If you want to work a semifinal or a final, there's got to be many more thou shalts than shall nots. You just got to do it. You got to do it by the manual. If you're consistently doing it by the manual and you're looking good and you're sharp and you're going to rate out well. You're going to rate out well. You got to be looking for an A+ or a 5 in the areas in which you can control those things, those TYCCs. You've got to get an A+ in those things. All right. You got to have more ands than buts. And what I mean by that is, man, and they did this well, and they did this well, and they did this well, but they didn't do that very well, but they didn't do that. So you got to have more ands than buts. All right. And the other thing is you got to get your plays right. You've got to get your plays right. We can look really bad and get our plays right, and we might get a hand spank, but we're going to be okay. It doesn't matter how good you look. If you get your plays wrong, you're still going to suck. And it's important that you do your best to get your plays right. And you guys got to try to get a good film too. You got to, whether you're doing it yourself, some do it yourself. We did not do any of our films ourselves. I had conversations with the schools in which we went to. I talked to them. I told them what we needed, and I was able to get that from most of them. But you got to try to get a good film. All right. And I know that's harder. That's maybe a little bit harder in some areas than it is other, but you got to get the schools to want to work with you to get you a good film. And again, it needs to look more like an art than it does a science. You got to do that. You got to look fluid. You got to look well. You got to also have fun and you got to enjoy the ride. I'm just going to give you a personal example here. I really thought I had a really good crew this year. I mean, I really thought we had a good crew, and I thought we could do a really good job. But whenever it got time, whenever the film was on, and whenever, you know, it kind of the rubber met the road, some of the guys on our crew froze up. And you got to make sure when you're choosing these crews and you're training your people, you got to, when the film's on, you know, probably a lot of the guys in your association work really good games during the year when there's no film on and you don't have a skin in the game. There's a reason why we see a lot of the same people working these high level games at whatever sport, basketball, football, NFL, NBA. It's because when the rubber meets the road, they know how to handle the situations. And it's important that you do that. You still got to try to have fun and do well with it. But you know, you just got to know how to handle all that. So I'm going to stop here for just a moment, and then and I'll take some questions. And if anybody, you know, has any questions or comments, then I'll be glad to try to answer them. And then if not, I can show you a couple of film clips of just some examples. If it'll work well, we can do that. But any questions for me at all?
Everybody will have to, if you have a question, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Hey, Greg.
Yes.
When we were talking about the ECO,
Yes.
I think everybody needs to stress, and it helped me when I had my situation with working clocks. If they don't have a backup piece, that's going to get you in more trouble than you'll ever get out of.
This is true. That's good advice, Spencer. That is good advice.
Greg, Charles Stamper.
Hey, Charles.
All right. I know you said that you always wave your umpire off on every play.
I do.
A lot of the offenses are, you know, pretty up tempo now, and a lot of times, you know, really don't have a chance to wave them off. He needs to put the ball down and back out. You know, not turn it back to you on the ball, but put it down and back out in order to get out of the way, right?
Well, yeah, we're going to let them go as fast as they want to go, but they're going to go. We're going to control that just a little bit. I mean, you know, just if you don't wave him off and they snap it before your crew is in position, the only guy on the field that can see whether or not everybody's in their spot is going to be the referee. And so, you know, we want to have a good tempo. I think, you know, we've kind of said, you know, that, you know, the 40-second play clock is going to start about 2 to 3 seconds, you know, after we've kind of got the ball and we're getting it to a spot. But when you get that ball to that umpire, you know, you need to be in your position and the referee needs to be in his position, and the umpire doesn't need to back out until he's in his spot. Because if they snap the ball and you're turned around and you're not there and everybody else is not there, we got a mess. So that's why I use the wave off. I'm not saying you have to use the wave off. I'm just saying that there needs to be some form of communication between you and your umpire before he backs out to let him know that, hey, you're ready and you're going to be able to officiate that ball. You know, Rob is really good. He talks about how that, you know, he verbally can control his center. He'll tell his center, don't snap that ball. Don't snap that ball. Okay, go. And that's fine. But it's important that you and your umpire, you marry up and you don't let him get off that ball, or you don't let them snap that ball until you're ready to go. Your crew's ready to go.
All right.
Hey, Greg, I have a really picky question. So on scoring, so TDs, field goals, tries, what's your take on mirroring, you know, the touchdown signal or the field goal or the try to the press box after that score?
I believe that this is how I do it, and I think the manual says this. I'd have to go back and look and be sure, but the only time that the referee should give a touchdown signal is on field goals and try for points, not on touchdowns unless you're actually down there at the goal line, or if you're on the goal line and you've got the safety. But I don't give it. I mean, you know, unless you just need to do it because as a point of there's some questions of whether or not he's in and the guy didn't. So then if you need to turn around and give the touchdown signal, that's fine. But the initial signal doesn't need to come from the referee on a touchdown.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
Greg,
Yes, sir. Hello? Lost you.
Greg,
Yes.
just one thing on confirming a touchdown. I had a coordinator tell me a long time ago, you got 6 other guys out there who that's their job to tell you whether it's a touchdown or not. There's no reason for you as the referee to confirm something that 6 other guys, that's their job.
That's good advice. It's good stuff.
Greg, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, get back what Charles was saying about, these hurry up offenses and, telling holding the ball for telling the umpire to hold the ball. What does it hurt anything to hold the hurry up offense for 3 to 5 seconds long enough for your crew to get set, then wave him off?
Doesn't hurt at all. Doesn't hurt at all. I mean, they're going to go as fast as we'll let them go. All right. Most of them are going to go as fast as they'll let them go. And the other thing that I see a lot of times is, obviously things are going to speed up when you get in the last minute or minute and a half a game. And you know what? We want to try to speed up a little bit for them, but we can't. But, we don't want to have one of those situations where we have the ball snapped and we weren't ready. And then we've got it just becomes very complicated. It looks difficult for us. So your umpire is very vital in those games where we have, them really trying to speed things up. They're very vital. So that is the very reason why we want, the umpire to be holding them, is because we want to make sure that they're going on our tempo, not necessarily, at their own tempo.
All right. That answers my question.
All right. So of any evaluators, I know we're going to try to do, another session. I think James is going to try to do another session with you guys to help a little bit more to try to bring forth some consistency, with our evaluation process. I think one of the most frustrating things that I heard from a lot of different people is there was evaluations that were sent back last year where some of the comments that were in the comment section, which I'm sure affected their rating, was inaccurate based on what the manual says. So any questions about any of that from any of you evaluators and that process? I mean, how can we really want to try to make it more consistent, with how we evaluate so that it's it'll be fair for everybody. Not that it wasn't fair, but it'll just help that we're kind of all having the same idea of how we evaluate.
I think personally, just doing this, is very important. So we're all hearing it from the same source. And the more of these discussions and meetings that we have, the more consistent we can be. I thought last year was a good start. Last year was my first year being on it, so I don't really have a base to look at. But, I certainly feel more prepared going into this season, than I have. And I think this helps. So this is good.
Anybody else? James, I'm going to show one thing here. I'm not going to try to show a film clip, but I am going to try to show one thing here. I can find it.
I got everybody's video off, so.
Okay, yeah, no. Okay, so hang on. I'm going to just show one file here, all right.
You got to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to. I just was trying to get to it. So for those of you that are evaluators, so this is just a this is an evaluation that I did last year for the crew that was a semifinal crew who worked a championship game, who did a very good job. All right. And so you can just kind of see some of the details that I gave when I did an evaluation. All right. So, you know, for those of you that are new to the evaluation process or in the evaluation process, if you're not doing something like this, I would challenge you to do that, because when I get an evaluation back, or if anybody gets evaluation back and you give them a 3 and you don't give them anything at all in that category, or if you give them a 2 or 2.5 or a 3 or a 3.5 and you don't make any comments, you know, my first question is, did they really watch the game? Well, how did they derive at that? And so, as you can see, I'm pretty detailed. And you'll even see, like, I mean, there's several things in here where I said, good job, terrible job, not so well. But this crew, I still, when I was through and I did an evaluation for the GHSA and I had to respond back to Kevin, I recommended this crew for a final. I thought they did a very good game. This game went to overtime. They had some tough plays in this game. And I'm just, so as evaluators, I would just challenge you not to evaluate the films to try to find things that you think they're not doing. Try to find things that they're doing right. And, you can watch a film pretty quickly and be able to tell whether or not, hey, these guys, they got it going on. And just give the evaluation process its due justice. So one of the things that I don't like about that I struggle with the evaluation process is that Kevin wants them in by 9:00 on Sunday night. Okay, so I got a game on Friday, I got basketball on Saturday, I got church on Sunday. So that means sometime during that time, I've got to spend 2 or 3 hours to figure out how to evaluate that film and do this detail. Because if I can't do that and I can't give the detail, then I can't do it. So I would just say, for those of you that are evaluators, if you want to be an evaluator and you want to be a respected evaluator, make sure you give them some details. Make sure you give them some nuts and bolts so that they'll understand why you gave them what you gave them, and make sure that it matches the RDP, the mechanics manual, the gospel. All right. That's really all I've got, James, unless somebody's got questions for me or comments. I will just wait. Now, when I do this camp during the summer, there will be a lot of film that I'll show, and I'll give specific examples, in each area of good and bad. It's kind of difficult to do that on Zoom, because you have to open up each individual clip. You have to share each clip. It's really hard to do that. But hopefully, this targeted the folks, and will give you some ideas as to what can help us to be better trainers and also better evaluators this coming year.